I'm Nicola Talent, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com. Sorry, I have a twitch in my eye.
You don't
We're not
see
starting
it,
with
no.
this. Can you see it?
Well,
It's really annoying
no.
me. I feel like everyone can see it, and it's like as if I'm winking at you.
Can't see it. But
Okay, we won't.
I mean, I'll
start
leave
with
that in, no?
Well, if you want, particularly
Because I mean, that's not even.
tiredness. Do you know that?
Well, allegedly.
Allegedly, according to
Can
Google,
I not tell
Dr. G.
Can I not tell the story about your
What now?
your phone is ringing?
What do you mean?
So we were at a meal. We were brought out for a meal with the company that run the advertising for the podcasts. And there was various luminaries from the podcast worlds there, you know. And, you know, we were interacting as if we were just normal people, normal, you know, serious broadcasting icons,
Yeah.
you know, chatting with
We
other
made
icons.
our own way, and we didn't have a driver. Or anything.
No. So we were like, you know,
Whole
we were
thing was
we were
ridiculous.
putting up a good show, really, for a couple of pair of old, you know, washed up tabloid hacks. And right up until
Right. Then.
you had a couple of, what was it, Prosecco's or?
No, I don't
was-
drink Prosecco, and it was
What was
nothing to do with having a couple
Well,
of
you'd had a
anything.
couple and you were.
It was nothing to do with having a couple of anything. I have bad hearing as well as bad eyesight.
Well, so what happened was there was some of this, as my grandfather used to call it, bang bang music,
Yeah.
which is basically this thing that was invented. It was invented popularized in the 1990s after probably you sort of gave up on music around Deacon Blues' last album of the 80s.
I think we're going to. Are we going to have our first row?
No, we're not. We're not, right? So this electronic music, it's made up of sort of, you know, drum machines and stuff, right? I'm just putting the context for you. So there was some of this electronic dance music, bang bang music, as my grandfather used to say, going on in the restaurant. And you'd obviously not tuned in to popular culture since Deacon Blues' last hit album in the 1980s. And this music was going on, and you all of a sudden started declaring, your phone is going off. And then proceeded to tell everybody your phones are going off. And it was only subsequently it was revealed that was actually music going on.
I
in
was
the background.
actually sitting there having a conversation with somebody to my left.
Yeah.
And I turned back to the conversation to the rest of the table to my right. And
Yeah.
all I could hear was what sounded to me like a phone.
Yeah.
And then I got panicky that somebody's phone was ringing. I actually thought it was Dion Fanning's phone.
Did you?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I actually made him
Did you look at
because
his
he had his phone
Yeah.
upside down on the table.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
which I always think is a bit.
But
You know, when
don't
people-
attack
my,
anybody.
my teenagers put their phones upside
yeah.
down in case anybody sees what's coming in
Who's
on them.
calling her?
But anyway, and he had the phone upside down the table, and I was sure it was ringing beside him, and he couldn't hear it. I
Yeah.
thought he was the one with the
Yeah.
hearing issue.
Yeah.
He was the
Yeah.
elderly guy at the table,
Yeah.
and I had to save him. So I
Yeah.
just said, "Dion, I think your phone is ringing there," and he went, "No, it's not, Nicola, no."
Then you asked another couple
And then
of people.
I asked you,
Yeah. Well, I'm a person.
was it was it your phone? And
Yeah.
you said, "I think it's the music."
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't so bad. It was just a slight elderly moment. And
Really?
anybody around my age knows that they happen quite frequently. And,
Yeah.
you know, they're part and parcel of...
And you could inform your listeners, not all music these days has guitars and stuff like that, bass guitars. Some
Yeah.
of it has these weird electronic sounds.
Electronic sounds, yeah.
Just a warning, a
Yeah.
public health warning. It can be mistaken for a phone,
It can.
if
It
you're
can.
if you're not tuning in fully.
Was that very elderly?
That was,
it? Okay.
It wasn't your finest.
My usual.
No.
Anyway, what we're going to talk about here, because there's other issues going on with me now, and the forgetfulness and everything, and all of this is happening. So I'll just keep this show on the road, will I, after you went off into that little
No,
thing?
well, I mean, are you
And
going to
the reason we're
Yeah.
here is not to slag me off about sort of a mishap that occurred in a very noisy restaurant. It is to talk about 3 women who have admitted money laundering offences.
You also had kind of senior moments.
They did
to an extent.
with their Revolut account.
Yeah.
In relation to the Boylan Organised Crime Group, the Boylan Organised Crime Group is pretty interesting at the moment because, of course, there are individuals at the very top of that who've been on the run for quite a significant amount of time. The Boylan grouping would have been one of the two feuding groups in Drogheda during those awful years when, the town became a war zone.
Yeah.
But they have managed to remain on the run in the ether. There was rumours initially they were in Mexico or Colombia. And the last I had heard they were in Dubai.
Yeah.
And have heard different, that they are in the Thailand area.
Well, I think I did hear one of them was certainly in Thailand for a period of time. Josh Boylan certainly had been said. But of course, they are moving around. I mean, they've been named as the Boylan Organised Crime Group as a result of a number of these cases that have been brought really against people that are, like these three women in question, who are really moving money around on behalf of the two leaders.
This kind of money is small fry compared to what it would cost to remain on the run.
Yeah.
You need a phenomenal amount of money to remain out of the country.
Well, you do, and this does look kind of small fry, because I think the figures you're talking about, one of the figures is 44,000, one is 17,000. I think the other is something around the same, another 17,000. So in the scheme of things, when you're talking about the Kinahans buying, multi-million euro villas in Dubai, it looks very small.
And these women have kind of contended, and I mean, it hasn't been objected to by the Gardaí involved in these prosecutions, that they're kind of been, this is part of their past. They didn't gain anything from it, and they've kind of been left behind.
Yeah, and obviously, these sums in of themselves are not huge sums, but I suppose it speaks to the determination of the Gardaí to go after this organised crime gang, to make sure they're not being funneled a certain amount of, being kept going really by being facilitated by people that aren't necessarily involved in criminality otherwise. And this certainly seems to be the case there. You're not seeing this hugely sophisticated operation. I mean, it's basically being carried out on Revolut. It's not, we're not seeing...
The money seems to come onto the Revolut account and then it's forwarded onto bank accounts or it's moved on. It doesn't seem to sit there for very long. We should name, of course, these three defendants, none of whom have any previous convictions and who've appeared at Dundalk Circuit Court for a sentence hearing. They're due to be sentenced later in the month. Leah Smith is 26. She's from St. Cronan's Court in Swords, County Dublin. Niamh McManus is 39 and she's from Maudlin's Lane in Duleek in County Meath. Now, she has the association with Josh Boylan.
Yeah, she describes herself as a former partner of Josh Boylan.
Yeah, and then finally Amy Rooney, who's 31 of Newtown Meadows, Drogheda, County Louth. They've all admitted laundering the money for the Boylan organised grouping. So a Detective Garda, Niall McManus, gave evidence during the sentence hearing and said as part of the ongoing probe into the Boylan OCG, this financial investigation of bank accounts had been carried out. And the result of it was the Gardaí concluded that these women were laundering the money on behalf or at the direction of the OCG.
Yeah, like Leah Smith she was described in court as a former partner of an unnamed member of the group, but she also had a clear connection with the Boylan clan. She'd lived for a while with Shannon Boylan, who's described as a sister of Keith and Josh. Now, Keith is the older of the brothers and he's described as the leader of the organised crime group, and Josh is described as the second in command. So Leah Smith is accused of laundering and has pled guilty to laundering 14,000 through a Revolut account between July and September in 2020. So that's a 4-month period. 14,000 is not a huge amount of money. It's not a life-changing amount of money, but it's still a very significant amount of money for that small period of time. Yeah. And remember,
just 2 months, really.
Yeah, and she's not the only source of, what they've done clearly is sort of separate this, get a number of people involved, keep the money, the amount.
But if you look at those dates, July 2020 to September 2020, it would have been around that time the Boylans brothers were leaving the country. You had, in January of 2020, the murder of Cian Mulready Woods. You had the visitation by the then Taoiseach Leo Varadkar to Drogheda. You had the commitment to, whatever resources were needed. You had Robbie Lawler dying in the April of 2020, and really the whole thing had fallen apart by July into September of 2020, and people were scrabbling to,
Totally. I mean, there was constant...
stay out of reach of law.
And you're talking about the murders, but there was just a never-ending stream of attempted shootings, fire bombings, all sorts of attacks. So
there had been, I would say that by the July to the September, those months in question, that had quelled. And I think that the Gardaí had nearly got a handle on it. The tide had turned against the criminals at that point.
Yes. So obviously it is believed that these two brothers got out for two reasons, because the guards are closing in on them, obviously, and they are currently facing, some criminal charges, but also their rivals were out to get them and out to kill them on sight. So yeah, it's not huge money. And when Leah Smith was arrested, she said she made no financial gain, no longer had contact with any of the Boylans, and told Gardaí, "I don't care anymore." Now another woman, Amy Rooney, the court heard she had done 20 top-ups on a Revolut account, amounting to just over €17,000, and that was transferred to the OCG between June 2019 and February 2021, which is sort of in the same...
That's in the height of the feud.
Yeah, that's in the height of the feud when these murders, and obviously the murder of Robbie Lawler had occurred at the end of that. She told investigators she was in no way involved in criminality. And she said that her former partner, a guy called Joey Huerty, had lost his life in Colombia, and he was an associate of the Boylan OCG, and it made her life a living nightmare, effectively. And the guards, I suppose, get to give their say, and Garda Detective McManus agreed that Amy was in fear of the OCG.
Joey Huerty's RIP notice says that he died in the September of 2023, suddenly in Colombia. It reads that he was sadly missed by his loving mother, Geraldine, brother John, his 4 girls, extended family, relatives, and many friends here and abroad. That repatriation to Ireland had taken place with the assistance of the Irish Embassy in Colombia and Alban Repatriation International in London, with the direction of the Kevin Bell Trust. And obviously the family were very grateful in relation to that. This was a sudden death in Colombia. We know no more about that as regards who he may have been with or why he was there.
Yes. Now, the third woman, Niamh McManus, she's slightly older than the other two at 39 years old, and she was described in court as an ex-partner of Josh Boylan. Now, the dates of her offences probably come towards later than the other two women, probably as these guys are, gone and not returning for sure at this point. And she had transferred over 22,000 out of her Revolut account between February 21 and April 22. And it was heard in court that she had said there was an element of control in her relationship to Josh Boylan.
Now, last year, 3 other women who laundered money for this same grouping received 2.5-year suspended sentences at Dundalk Circuit Court. You had Jade Heaney from Drogheda, 27, Anna Julia Smith, 28, from Gormanston, and Marlena Alexandra Quitz, who is 29, from Santry. They each admitted 1 count of money laundering through their respective, again, Revolut accounts, which they allowed the gang to use. They were in court described as the lower scale of a money laundering enterprise, and none of them had profited from it again.
Yeah.
They'd no previous convictions.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a tactic that they decided to use, obviously. Like, if you reach a certain level of transfers in a bank, the bank are, they effectively have to report it to guards, but they also have this range of software that alerts the bank if there's any dodgy transactions, particularly over a certain amount. So this is obviously a strategy that the Boylans attempted to use, which was to spread the money across a large number of women, none particularly that are going to, be arrested on a constant basis or involvement in the drugs trade in an attempt
And
to
yet
beat
they were
those.
close to them, like Jade Heaney, who got the suspended sentence last year. She's the former partner of Keith Boylan.
Yeah.
Annie Julia Smith is the former partner of Josh Boylan. And Marlena Alexandra Quitz was a friend of Keith Boylan's girlfriend.
Yeah.
So they're using a network of women that they are in relationships with, have been in relationships with. They're using them according to what's accepted by the court. They are making no money out of it. They're just allowing their phones be used, their Revolut accounts be used as a conduit.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, look, the Boylans don't have the best interest of these women in their hearts by any stretch of the imagination, because these cases are widely reported. All of those 6 women that have been referred to, while you might hear that they're not involved in criminality, it's certainly a huge degree of shame to be associated.
Well, I don't know whether there's a shame, but the judge in that case last year, Judge Dara Hayes, said that, the Gardaí accepted they were at the lower rung of money laundering.
Yeah.
But they did provide significant assistance.
Yeah.
That they were not naive women,
no.
The judge said. Each knew who they were involved with and the type of criminality they engaged in. And Judge Hayes continued that the fear of the criminals in question did play a role. It was accepted that the 3 women got in over their heads, and there's a kind of an element of, in these cases, there is this sort of overarching suggestion of a little bit of coercive control.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm sure they are. These guys are scary people. I mean, they're certainly heavily involved.
But I mean, there's a point in time where these women know who they're getting involved in and get involved willingly as well,
And remember, like, while their names are being, the Boylans' names as a result of these cases are now in the national media. I mean, everybody in Drogheda knew who they were for a long, long time, knew what they looked like. I mean, these women certainly knew that they were involved in this violent murderous feud, they were heavily involved in the drugs business. So, it's not as if they can say they didn't know what they were doing. I mean, they clearly did know what they were doing. And the movement of money, as we've spoken about many times, like, it's not an incidental part of criminality. It's a hugely significant part of it. It is the purpose of drugs crime is to make money, and the people who facilitate the movement of it know what they're doing, and they face consequences, and they have faced these consequences now.
When's the sentencing? Later this month, is it?
February the 24th.
February the 24th, okay.
Yeah.
So they will know whether or not, but looking back on the previous case, there was suspended sentences given out there, so that's possibly going to follow a similar line. Okay, Niall, thank you.
Thanks, Nicola.
If you're a crimeworld.com subscriber, you've probably already binged on our latest exclusive podcast series, The Regency 10 Years On, from the hit that changed gangland forever. This 6-part anniversary special revisits that fateful day when David Byrne was shot dead at the Northside Hotel, igniting a bloody feud between the Kinahan and Hutch gangs, one of the deadliest rivalries in Irish history. Here's a taste of the new series, exclusive to crimeworld.com subscribers. So that Friday was one of those really quiet days. I mean, we all knew that Daniel Kinahan was in Dublin for the Clash of the Clans boxing weigh-in. At least we knew he was due into Dublin the next day. That Clash of the Clans bout match had been heavily advertised, but the day itself there was just little going on.
So there was very little happening that day. It's February. It's kind of a quiet enough time for news in general. And Alan Cherry and Ernie Leslie were on the road. They were at another story actually in Finglas.
What was that? Do you remember?
Well, it was one of these classic sort of district court stories where a guy I think some teenagers had thrown stones at his car and he got out and slapped the teenager. Always great kind of human stories because some people feel sorry for the teenagers and some people don't. And so Alan had been out there. But the guy had moved on. He'd called out to his house to see if he wanted to talk. He'd moved on. He wasn't there. And we discussed going to the Regency earlier. And I said, look, just go along and see what happens. Divert there. We obviously weren't expecting anything. And obviously that point of Alan being there would be the subject of conspiracy, but we'll get into that at a later point.
For sure. So it was a case really that day of, one thing hadn't worked out, so go to the next. But also there was definitely a general sense of, if we could be there, just in case.
Yes, and as you said, to see who was standing beside the Kinahans and who wasn't from that bigger organised crime group. So Alan and Ernie went out. I got a call. I think you got a call almost simultaneously, but I got a call from Alan. I'd spoken to him earlier on the day saying, see what happens. And he phoned me up and said, there's after been a shooting and I think we've got a picture. And I actually went, yeah, very funny. But of course, he stopped me and said, no, I'm serious. There's some guys come out with a gun, there's shots fired, and there's total and utter chaos. And, our first thought is, get yourself safe. I have to admit, my second thought was, I hope they did get good pictures. But, you're still thinking they have to get safe. I mean, I know you probably got a similar call because Ernie and Alan obviously were in the same Jeep.
And of course, Ernie's the guy taking the photographs,
yes.
So he's on the phone to me. So I actually had gone for a pizza for lunch and I had come back over to the office and the phone rings and it was Ernie. And I answered and he was panicked on the other end of the phone. This was real high octane stuff. And he's still trying to take photos. He's trying to tell me what's happened. He's told me he thinks he's got a good one of one of the shooters as they were running from the scene. He was trying to call up the photograph on the back of his camera.
Yeah.
Because it would have taken him a while to get it onto a screen, but he'd also sent it into the office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he was kind of in the middle of doing a number of things. And as I was on the phone to him from memory, the photograph came into the office and we put it up on the big screen. And it was clear to see that this wasn't just one of the shooters as he suspected, but it was two. One of them was dressed as a woman.
Which is, of course, there was also this confusing story about guards coming in with weapons, and obviously we know now that they weren't ERU guys, they were guys dressed as them. But Alan was telling me this, there was talk of these guards, and then obviously there was, the crowd fleeing from the scene. So it was all confusing. But as you said, Ernie had taken a picture of the back of his camera. People will know what the photographer's cameras look like, and they have a little digital screen. So you don't see it in great detail. But we knew this is a once-in-a-lifetime photograph has been gotten.
Yeah, as soon as it came in. And of course, look, the newsrooms aren't as busy as they used to be. They used to be very busy, buzzy places with phones ringing everywhere. And it felt like a proper newsroom that day. I remember everybody's phone was going. People were hearing little bits about it. The news was starting to break about it. And of course, we were there sitting in the office with this photo. There's that sort of news sense in you that you want to run this.
Yeah.
And at the time, we weren't putting stuff up online. This would have been held for the paper on the Sunday, and this is a Friday afternoon. We had something really special here. But we also, I think, knew the guards were going to be desperate for that picture because they were two gunmen running from a scene of a crime. So it was a very compromised situation, and there was a bit of arguments going on, and there was voices were raised.
Totally. I mean, because it is complex. I mean, normally the journalism likes to keep itself separate from the Gardaí investigations. So Garda investigations go on and journalism reports on them. But obviously then you're put in this compromising position because you have guys running out visibly with handguns in their hands. And, they're obviously then disappeared into the ether. And you have to have a discussion about what is your civic responsibility in terms of, do you help the guards? You don't want these armed gunmen to run down the street and kill another few people. So it was a complex one, and people were aware straight away that the guards are going to want these pictures and want to use it for their purposes. And we also have our purposes, which is to tell what happened and to report on the news. So there was a conflict straight away.
From my memory, as the afternoon went on and, I was talking to contacts and to other people who were involved in crime journalism, etc., it became apparent that there were no guards at the weigh-in. That in actual fact, the guards didn't seem to be there at all. They were called literally by the hotel and had arrived in response to what had already gone on. Of course, David Byrne had been shot dead in the reception of the hotel. We were getting photographs in later in the day, which showed a very shocked-looking Liam Byrne standing outside the hotel, his hands in his pockets, standing beside his cousin Liam Rowe, another significant cartel member. There was no sign of Daniel Kinahan. I was getting calls from people who were telling me that these professional killers had been flown into the country and had already been flown out. There was rumours, there was spin, and also there was the general, I suppose, conversations in regards to, oh my God, what is going to happen next? I mean, all anyone knew for sure was something was going to happen. David Byrne was a very, very senior lieutenant. He was also from criminal royalty, from the Byrne family. His brother-in-law is Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. His brother is Liam Byrne, and he's very much at the heart of the Kinahan cartel. We knew from the beginning that this attack had occurred as part of the rivalry between the Kinahan and Hutch factions of what was once the one organisation. And I think everybody was really trying to predict what this might lead to, but nobody could have guessed.
Nobody could have guessed. And of course, those rumours straight away went around. It was straight away focused on the Hutch gang. But at this time, if you remember, while there had been other incidents, for example, an attempted hit on Jerry Hutch in Lanzarote, it wasn't, those incidents weren't always public. People were straight away thinking this isn't the type of normal organised crime operation. They were looking at the weapons, saying, is there a paramilitary organisation involved here? Nobody knew fully. And of course, what people did fear straight away was, no matter what, people knew how big and how powerful the Kinahans had become, and the likelihood of them not striking back was inevitable. That blood was going to flow.
That bit absolutely 100%. But at that very early stage, I recall contacts of mine suggesting that the Hutches were an army. Did they have the backing of the dissidents? Was this going to, were they going to be very heavily armed because of that? They had contacts in the north. It was like as if people were trying to size up how two Premiership teams were going to play against one another. That's what it felt like. You've been listening to an extract from The Regency, 10 years on from the hit that changed gangland forever. Visit crimeworld.com and subscribe to hear the full series now. And you'll also get exclusive access to our other podcast deep dives on the Dapper Don, Christy Kinahan, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, and more.